Hi everyone, I'm Wombu, and this is my top 10 Kanto Pokemon. Now, I'm still debating whether or not to do more of these lists for the other generations, but regardless, how does the first generation's roster stack up in comparison to the others? Well, in my opinion, it holds up pretty damn well. Now don't get me wrong, we had some horrible Pokemon, just absolutely awful. But the good Pokemon are also some of the best. It's a huge mix of good and bad, underrated and overrated Pokemon that ultimately amounts to a good generation on the whole. With that out of the way, let's start with honorable mentions. Beedrill wasn't actually that close to being on the list, but his Mega Form looks pretty damn sweet, so as of right now, he's just an honorable mention. Next. Yeah, not even kidding right now. I actually play Little Cup a fair bit, and Shelter wasn't only remarkably dangerous, but also cute and hilarious. Its evolved form Cloyster is also a really good Pokemon, but it has a bit less going on the hilarity factor. Next. Earth Power, Earthquake, Megahorn, Sludge Bomb, Sludge Wave, Venoshock, Ice Beam, Blizzard, Taunt, Thunder, Thunderbolt, Brick Break, Shadow Ball, Flamethrower, Fire Blast, Focus Blast, Shadow Claw, Stone Edge, Rock Slide, Poison Jab, Power Up Punch, Head Smash, Sucker Punch, Iron Tail, Aqua Tail, Dragon Pulse, Surf, Outrage, Thunder Punch, Fire Punch, Ice Punch, Super Power, and Super Fang. Need I say more? And now on to the list. Going into this list, iconography wasn't really going to be a criteria for it, but I've got a light ball with a number 10 on it, and it's only made for one Pokemon. There's certainly more competitively viable Pokemon in Gen 1, but there isn't a single Pokemon in existence that can claim to be the face of the franchise like Pikachu. It's no wonder Pikachu had been able to win the hearts of men, women, children, and adults alike. I mean, just look at him! Oh, so cute! Stop! You're killing me! It's also no wonder that each generation afterwards gave us some kind of Pikachu ripoff, some of which I actually kinda like. Pikachu isn't totally useless on the competitive front though. Thanks to the light ball item I mentioned earlier and its weird cosplays introduced in Gen 6, Pikachu is actually about as viable as its evolved form Raichu. It still has the defenses of rice paper, but it's technically usable. Even without competitive uses though, the mascot of Pokemon has more than earned its way onto the number 10 spot. Also, he's ridiculously fun to play in Smash Bros. Just saying. Don't laugh at me. Some things may look simple on the outside, but Dugtrio's uses in battle far exceeds the limits of human understanding. Okay, no, not really. It's a simple Pokemon with a simple use in battle, and a comically lazy design, but goddamn if it isn't effective. Dugtrio's main assets include being really fast, being powerful, and having the Arena Trap ability. That last one in particular is really important because switching is an essential part of competitive play. So when Dugtrio hops onto the field and prevents the other Pokemon from escaping, it makes securing KOs way easier. It's very frail and susceptible to status and priority moves, but in the right situations, it's one of the most potent revenge killers in the game. In conclusion, of all the Pokemon to be spawned from Gen 1's weird obsession with the number 3, Dugtrio was definitely my favorite. So what's your favorite Pokemon, huh? Is it one that's really cool in concept like Absol, or one that's really cute like Pikachu? Maybe it's one that's really powerful like Haxorus. Well, why not all of them? Now, you may notice that Gen 1 probably has some of the most derpy looking Pokemon of any generation, and Ditto might as well be the king next to the Slowpoke line. Its only power is, and has always been, the ability to transform. And while Ditto is not the only Pokemon with this power, he is certainly the best at it thanks to its Dreamworld ability it got in 5th gen, Imposter. Upon switching into battle, Ditto immediately copies the appearance and stats of the opposing Pokemon. Match this with a Choice Scarf, and Ditto becomes faster than the Pokemon it copies. This honestly makes him a fantastic Pokemon competitively, even if he is in the never used tier. You can very easily find use for him on any team, but that isn't the only reason Ditto gets this spot. Depending on your social life, if you're one of those super methodical EV and IV trainers, then chances are that Ditto is your best friend ever. I'll admit, it's awesome the way Ditto can not only breed with every Pokemon, but also influence the EVs, IVs, and nature of the kid. Interpret this usage as you will, but I personally like to think that Ditto is the greatest Pokemon breeder of all time. I mean, what better way to study Pokemon breeding than to actually breed with the Pokemon? Don't get any ideas. Now, Ditto may or may not supposedly be a failed experiment of Mew, but let's be honest, which of the two got the most work out of the whole ordeal? That's right. This part of the list is absurdly tough to narrow down, as I like all the Pokemon from this entry to the number 2 spot almost the same. It was agonizing to even put a single one of them down here, much less this one. I have friends that hate this Pokemon, and say it's the worst ever. They're dumb. Tentacruel might have been able to make the list alone with its awesome design and its good speed and defensive stats, but thankfully his assets go far beyond just that. Tentacruel's move pool actually has a rather wonderful mix of reliable and powerful attacking moves and ridiculously useful support moves. Being able to set up and also remove toxic spikes is one thing, but Tentacruel also gets access to Rapid Spin and Knockoff, meaning he can not only just get rid of entry hazards, but items as well. It kinda makes Tentacruel a bit of a killjoy for the opponent. It's in the name, after all. For the most part, you aren't going to be doing any crazy sweeps with Tentacruel so much as you are just crippling the opponent in a number of ways, and that's just a bunch of fun to me. Also, just a warning, Tentacruel is only the first of many water Pokemon to make it onto this list. Trust me, there's going to be a lot more. A little sooner than you might have thought. Some people will tell you that the evolutions are ridiculously overrated Pokemon, but I am not one of those people. In fact, for the most part, their stats and abilities are pretty fantastic. Let's take Vaporeon here as an example. Now, I love this thing. I've always kind of had a soft spot for cute Pokemon that can also kick ass, and Vaporeon definitely fits the bill pretty damn well. Admittedly, its attack and support move pool are fairly standard, but I can totally forgive it as long as it has some reliable and good moves, which it does. The main selling point here, though, is its incredible bulk. Boasting the highest HP stat of the evolutions and a decent amount of bulk and special defense, Vaporeon is unbelievably hard to KO. Even its physical defense, while not particularly good, can be mediated with Scald or Acid Armor. On its own, it's already hard to deal with, but stick him in the rain with the Hydration ability, and Vaporeon becomes a Pokemon of nightmares! The Hydration ability grants the power to instantly recover from any status affliction in the rain. And that only sounds worse and worse the more you think about it. Note, I didn't say he was immune to it, I said he recovers instantly from them. Greatly overstepping the line into OP territory, Vaporeon doesn't just brush off Paralysis, Burn, and Toxic, but also Sleep, meaning that the Rest move turns into an instant 100% recovery with no drawbacks. In Gen 5, this was the most frustrating thing on the planet, and it made me not want to use Vaporeon in fear of pissing other players off. But thankfully this was nerfed in Gen 6, with weather spawning abilities like Drizzle and Drought wearing off after about 4 to 8 turns. Now I can use this adorable little demon without guilt, and that feels really nice. Now, concept typically doesn't make or break a Pokemon for me, but I really like this one, so I'm going to talk about it. Believe it or not, there is more to the origin of Ninetales than just having 9 tails. You cultured otakus most likely know what I'm talking about, but in case you don't, Ninetales is actually based off of foxes of Japanese legend called Kitsune. Like Ninetales, the Kitsune have many tails, extremely long lifespans, and even the ability to breathe fire. So yeah, that's obviously exactly what Ninetales is. But what you're more likely not to have known about is that Ninetales actually references the Kitsune in more ways than just design. For example, Kitsune are said to take the form of spirits when they die, which is actually referenced through Ninetales having a prominence of ghost-type moves. Also, the Kyubi no Kitsune, the one Ninetales is based on, has its fur turn silver and gold upon gaining its 9th tail, and the shiny version of Ninetales sees its gold fur substituted with silver. The more you know. Now, I like this concept a lot, but I wouldn't have stuck it at number 5 on the list if I didn't like its use in battle as well. Stat-wise, Ninetales is actually fairly underwhelming. Its highest stats are special defense and speed, and even then they're kind of only sorta above average, but the Dream World ability makes up for it. You ever played Okami? Of course you have. You know how you can make the sun rise in that game? Well, that. Drought is an unbelievably good and also fitting ability that effectively makes a sunny day upon switching into battle. This doesn't just help support the team by tipping weather conditions in your favor, but it also makes Ninetales a whole lot better, helping push through its weaknesses to water and making its fire attacks really powerful. Even though it got a nerf in 6th gen, I'm really happy Ninetales got it, because a Pokemon of this high a concept deserves to be extremely good. One thing Gen 1 could be credited for is that it pretty easily had the best fossil Pokemon. Take the almighty Helix, for example. I like Kabutops and Aerodactyl just fine, but Omastar definitely earned its way into the number 4 spot. I honestly find it kinda sad that this guy doesn't get more recognition, as he's pretty fantastic and not just as fossil Pokemon go. He certainly has stats that aren't very good, but as far as I can see, his only huge weakness is his typing, which leaves him weak to a lot of common attacking types, including a 4x weakness to grass. Other than that, some of what I said about Tentacruel can be pretty easily applied to Omastar, mainly the part about being really useful for setting up entry hazards. In fact, Omastar has quite a lot of great qualities that seem to be excellent on paper alone. Access to spikes, toxic spikes, and stealth rock, a ridiculously high defense stat, an ability that doubles speed in the rain, the highest special attack stat of any rock-type Pokemon? Sign me up! Now admittedly, Omastar is notably more situational than Tentacruel. The typing makes it difficult for him to switch in, and he's only really a dangerous sweeper in the rain. But with Omastar, I feel like there's more potential to really cripple the opponent. There's a certain risk to reward factor in it, but the benefits of successfully using Omastar are insane. Trust me, the mighty Helix certainly earns its name if you give it the chance. And I don't just mean on the dance floor. This is the last water type on the list, I promise. Now, like I did with Ninetales, I'ma explain to you guys some things about the complexity of Starmie's design. Pretentious artist jokes aside, there is more to Starmie's design than just a star with another star on its back. More than just two stars sandwiched together, Starmie is actually based on the iconography of the Mesopotamian goddess Inanna. Not only that, but the name Starmie isn't just a play on words with you and me, but in fact the me part of the name comes from the Japanese word me, meaning gem or jewel. And now, you guys who claim Starmie's design to be uncreative feel like chumps. As you should! Now, Starmie would never have made it onto the number 3 on concept alone, but thankfully it's an incredibly good Pokemon. It's used most often as a sweeper, which it's incredibly good at. It's got a high speed and special attack stat, which is also really good, but it's also got a metric butt-ton of really good and reliable special attacking moves, including the infamous Bolt Beam combo. Starmie also gets Rapid Spin, which is really handy for supporting the team. Not only that, but it gets access to Recover, and the Natural Cure ability, meaning it can effectively take care of itself if it gets in a bad situation. And just to make it even trickier, it can copy the opponent's typing with Reflect type, and switch items with Trick. It's got all the great parts of a good sweeper, and even adds some weird moves into the mix that just make it a bunch of fun to send into battle. Did it work? Did I successfully subvert your expectations by making you think Omastar was going to be the only Gen 1 fossil Pokemon on this list? Well, regardless, in my opinion, Aerodactyl is bar none the absolute best fossil Pokemon to date. I adore this Pokemon. My closing statement about Starmie could just as easily be applied to Aerodactyl, except we're talking about naturally better stats on the whole. In fact, my reasons for loving Aerodactyl so much are pretty much in the exact same ballpark as why I love Starmie so much. Aerodactyl is an amazing sweeper, but that's not all he can do. At this point, I'm starting to feel like kind of a broken record, and you guys basically know how the drill goes at this point. Setting up entry hazards, removing entry hazards, recovery, setup moves, they're all there, and yeah, they're more conventional than Starmie's power to switch items or copy types, but that doesn't make them any less awesome. What I haven't mentioned yet, though, is that Aerodactyl is a great taunt user, which allows him to shut down defensive support Pokemon more easily. Not only that, but for the first time in the top 10, I get to talk about Mega Evolutions! I don't know if Mega Aerodactyl is particularly necessary. It's ridiculously powerful and is an absolute nightmare to fight in double battles, but I'm happy it exists nonetheless, because I always like to see Pokemon I love find more use in competitive play. Mega or not though, Aerodactyl is a phenomenal Pokemon that I love completely. Ladies and gentlemen, my favorite Pokemon from Generation 1. Jolteon is number 1 on this list for a million reasons. He's number 1 because I have a lot of nostalgia for him. He's number 1 because he's an incredibly effective and solid sweeper. He's number 1 because he has my favorite design for a Pokemon ever. He's number 1 because he's my most used Pokemon ever. Most of all though, if there's any Pokemon that represents my love for competitive play, it's Jolteon. I've played Pokemon games for a while, but I started getting into the more competitive aspects of it with Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, in which Jolteon was easily my most useful Pokemon. When I finally did start participating in competitive battles, I remembered how useful Jolteon had been for me before, so I decided to EV train one again, and surely enough, it ended up being one of my best Pokemon. Now it's basically a tradition that in every generation, I have to train a Jolteon at some point. As I got more into the competitive scene, I've tried using Jolteon in a billion stupid ways. I've used him as a sweeper, as a cleric, as a special wall, as a baton passer. I've used him on rain dance teams, sunny day teams, tailwind teams, even trick room teams for some reason. I enjoy playing competitively now more than ever, and finding all kinds of crazy unconventional ways to use Pokemon, and it all started with Jolteon. Now, since Gen 6 gave quite a few electric types a buff, Jolteon has had more trouble finding ways to stick out. I of course hope for the best, but even if he eventually becomes the worst Pokemon ever, he's more than earned his spot of being my absolute favorite Kanto Pokemon. And that's my list. I am Wombu, and see you around, everybody.